I died for 11 minutes. My heart stopped at 35,000 feet. And in that void between life and death, Jesus showed me 3 events that will reshape everything you know. The first is already happening. 300 million people trapped in wars that are about to merge into one global inferno. The second will shake the ring of fire so violently that entire coastlines will vanish. And the third will collapse every system you trust for survival. Right now, as you watch this, the countdown has already begun. That green comet crossing our skies in late October. It wasn't a light show. It was a timer marking when these events converge. My name is Marcus Chen. For 15 years, I've been a commercial airline pilot, flying presidents, celebrities, families across continents. I've watched cities glow like constellations from my cockpit at 35,000 feet. I believed in checklists, instrument panels, physics, everything I could control and measure. But 3 months ago, at 42 years old, my heart stopped mid-flight, and I discovered that everything I thought I understood about reality was wrong. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a prophet. I went to church on Christmas and Easter, the kind of Christian who knew the stories, but treated them like folklore. My wife Sarah used to ask if I actually believed any of it. I'd shrug and say something about tradition. The truth? I was terrified of seeming foolish, of admitting that a man who controlled a Boeing 787 at 40,000 feet might not have everything figured out. July 15th, 2025. I was deadheading back to Los Angeles after a Tokyo red-eye. At Narita Airport, I scrolled through my phone. Ukraine war entering year 4, Middle East conflicts escalating, another mass shooting in America. I felt this heaviness in my chest, not physical pain, but something deeper, like the world was groaning under invisible weight. I blamed fatigue, jet lag, the stress of watching humanity tear itself apart while I ferried people between the chaos. 30 minutes into the flight home, at cruising altitude, the pain hit. A spike through my sternum. My left arm went dead. The cabin tilted, except the instruments showed level flight. I tried to call out. My throat locked. Jake, the young co-pilot from Oregon, turned and saw my face. His eyes went wide with recognition. Cardiac arrest at 35,000 feet. Everything went dark. Not sleep darkness, not closed-eye darkness. This was absolute void, the kind that makes you question whether you ever existed. No body, no breath, no sound. For one eternal moment, I thought this was death, infinite nothing. And terror flooded through me, because I suddenly understood with perfect clarity that I'd wasted 42 years pretending I didn't need God. Then the darkness shattered. Every star in the universe ignited inside my chest. Warmth that wasn't temperature but pure love poured through me. The void transformed into living light, not harsh fluorescence, but radiance that knew me. That saw every hidden corner of my soul and loved me anyway. I was standing without legs, breathing without lungs, whole in a way I'd never been whole in my body. That's when I saw him. He stood 10 feet away, though distance felt meaningless there. Bronze skin, dark hair, eyes like amber burning within a fire. He wasn't the pale European from Sunday school paintings. He wore a simple white robe, and somehow I knew with absolute certainty this was the man who spoke galaxies into existence, who knelt in Gethsemane, who bled on Roman wood for every sin I'd ever commit. He smiled, not polite, not practiced, but the way a father smiles when his prodigal son finally comes home. "Marcus," he said. His voice was thunder and whisper at once. "Welcome." Emotion choked me. Gratitude, shame, awe, fear crashing over me in waves. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down a face I wasn't sure I still had. "I'm sorry," I managed. "I wasted so much time. I lived like you were a fairy tale." He knelt beside me. The creator of the universe lowered himself to my level. His hand touched my shoulder, and warmth flooded through me, not physical heat, but the sensation of every broken piece of my soul being gathered and held together. "I know," he said gently, "and I brought you here to show you what's coming. You're going back, Marcus. You have a message to carry." Going back? My voice cracked. I don't want to go back. This is home. I didn't know it until now, but this is where I've always belonged. "You will return here," he promised. "But not yet. The world is entering a time of great shaking, and many will fall away. I need witnesses who have seen behind the veil, who can speak with authority about what's real and what's counterfeit. He stood and extended his hand. I took it. His palm was scarred, the wound from the nail still visible, and touching it made me weep harder. And suddenly we weren't in that radiant void anymore. We were floating above Earth. I recognized the view immediately from years of flying. The curve of the horizon, the blue haze of atmosphere, the patchwork of continents and oceans. But something was different. The planet looked sick, bruised. Dark clouds swirled over multiple regions, and even from space, I could sense violence bleeding from those shadows. "Look," Jesus said, pointing. My vision zoomed in. I don't know how else to describe it. And suddenly I was seeing Ukraine. Not the sanitized news footage, but the ground truth. Cities reduced to rubble, families huddling in basements as artillery screamed overhead. Soldiers barely older than teenagers bleeding out in muddy trenches. The scale of suffering was beyond comprehension. "This war," Jesus said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "is just the beginning. Watch." The scene shifted to the Middle East. Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. Everywhere I looked, I saw the machinery of death grinding forward, bombs falling like rain, children's bodies pulled from collapsed buildings, refugee camps stretching to the horizon, millions of people living in tents with no hope of return. Right now, in October 2025, Jesus continued, over 300 million people around the world are displaced, starving, or trapped in active conflict zones. That number is real, Marcus, not exaggerated. 300 million souls crying out for mercy while the world looks away. I wanted to look away too. The agony was overwhelming, but he wouldn't let me. The comet they're watching right now, the one they call Lemon, it's a sign, a countdown. Many prophets sensed the urgency in September this year. They proclaimed the end was coming, that the rapture was at hand. Do you know why they were wrong? I shook my head, unable to speak. Because they mistook the beginning of birth pangs for the birth itself. The rapture comes after the tribulation tests every soul. The comet marks when these scattered conflicts stop being isolated wars and become one unified global conflagration. As he spoke, I watched the vision change. The wars in Ukraine and the Middle East began to spread like cancer. Russia pushed further west. NATO responded. China moved in the Pacific. India and Pakistan exchanged fire. African nations fractured along tribal and religious lines. Within what felt like months, though, I couldn't tell if this was vision or literal future. The entire world was ablaze. They thought they could contain it, Jesus said, his voice breaking. They thought borders and diplomacy would hold. But when nations prioritize pride and resources over peace, fire spreads until there's nothing left to burn. I saw millions fleeing across borders, only to be met with barbed wire and soldiers. I saw children dying of starvation in camps that stretched for miles. I saw young men forced to fight wars they didn't understand, for leaders who would never face battle themselves. This isn't prophecy of some distant future, Jesus said, turning to look at me with eyes full of tears. This is already beginning. The comet's appearance in late October marks when the world stops pretending these are separate conflicts, when they merge into one global crisis that will consume nations. Can it be stopped? I whispered. Yes, he said. If humanity turns from violence, if nations choose mercy over vengeance. But they won't, Marcus. Not enough of them. And that's when the second event will begin. The scene shifted again. This time, we were above the Pacific Ocean, and I could see the ring of fire, that horseshoe of volcanic and seismic activity circling the basin, glowing like an infected wound. On September 30th, just days before you died, Jesus said, a 6.7 magnitude earthquake struck the Philippines. Do you remember hearing about it? I did, vaguely. I'd been in Tokyo when it happened, and the news had shown footage of massive bird swarms filling the skies before the quake hit. People called it apocalyptic. Those birds knew, he said. Animals always sense when the earth is about to convulse, but humans have grown deaf to creation's warnings. I watched as the vision zoomed in on Santorini, the Greek island. Beneath the surface, magma churned and pressed upward. Thousands of tiny earthquakes rippled through the caldera, over 10,000 since January 2025, some reaching 5.2 magnitude. The Earth is alive, Marcus. It's not a dead ball of rock, it's my creation, and it responds to what happens on its surface. When Cain killed Abel, the ground cried out to me. For millennia, humanity has drenched this planet in blood. War after war, genocide after genocide. And now the earth itself is rejecting the violence. As he spoke, I saw the ring of fire begin to wake up. Not all at once, but like dominoes falling. An earthquake in Japan triggered volcanic eruptions in the Philippines. Pressure released in Indonesia caused fault lines to rupture in California. The Andes shook and Chile's coastline crumbled into the sea. Within what felt like weeks, the entire Pacific Rim was convulsing. "This isn't my wrath," Jesus said, and his voice was both gentle and terrible. "This is the earth screaming. Humanity's wars, their violence, their refusal to honor the creation I gave them. It's all come due. The earthquakes aren't punishment. They're consequence. They're mercy. A final attempt to shake people awake before the third event." "What's the third event?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. He paused, and for the first time I saw something like hesitation in his expression. Not uncertainty. He knew exactly what was coming, but the weight of having to show me. "These first two events," he said slowly, "will happen quickly. Wars cascading across continents, earthquakes shaking the ring of fire. But the third event is what will test every soul. It's not what you expect, Marcus. It's not another physical disaster. Then what is it? It's the collapse of every system humanity has built their security upon. I didn't understand. Wars and earthquakes made sense as disasters. But a collapse of systems? What systems? How could that be worse than millions dying? Jesus must have seen my confusion because he placed his hand on my chest, over where my heart would have been if I still had a body. "The 300 million people already in crisis globally," he said. "That number will multiply beyond counting. Not from lack of resources on Earth, but from the failure of every institution designed to distribute them. Governments, banks, religions, technology, all. The things people worship instead of me, they'll crumble like sand. Castles before a tsunami." "When?" I whispered. "Soon. The comet is the countdown. When it fades from your skies in late October, the window of preparation narrows." And then he stopped, looked at me with such profound sadness that I wanted to weep. "Then I show you the third vision, and everything changes." Jesus extended his hand, and suddenly I was above the earth again, but this time the view was different. The wars I'd seen were spreading like wildfire, consuming territories, swallowing nations. The earthquakes I'd witnessed weren't isolated tremors anymore. They were multiplying, intensifying, connecting. But what he was about to show me next wasn't another physical disaster. It was something far more devastating, because it would happen invisibly, slowly, creeping into every home and heart, until it was too late to stop. I felt his presence beside me, overwhelming and gentle at once. He didn't need to speak for me to understand that what was coming would test humanity in ways no earthquake or war ever could. This wasn't about survival of the fittest. This was about survival of the faithful. The ring of fire blazed in my vision like a crimson belt around the planet. I saw Japan's coastline shatter under a 9.0 magnitude earthquake. Towers crumbling like sandcastles, tsunami waves devouring entire cities in seconds. The Philippines erupted. Not just one volcano, but dozens simultaneously, ash clouds blotting out the sun, rivers of lava consuming villages. Indonesia's islands split apart, the ocean swallowing landmasses whole. California's fault lines ruptured in a chain reaction, skyscrapers swaying and collapsing, highways cracking open like broken bones. Chile's mountains collapsed, burying towns under avalanches of rock and ice. It wasn't just destruction. It was synchronized destruction, as if the earth itself had decided enough was enough. Jesus' voice filled the space around me, resonating through my entire being. The 10,000 earthquakes in Santorini since January, they're not isolated. The entire ring of fire is connected. When one ignites, the rest will follow within days. I understood then. The September 30th Philippines earthquake, the massive swarms of birds filling the skies that people filmed and called apocalyptic, those were warnings. The earth had been giving humanity signs all along, and almost no one recognized them. We were too busy looking at our phones, scrolling past disaster footage like it was entertainment, never imagining it was a countdown meant for us. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why is the earth doing this?" Jesus turned to me, and in his eyes I saw infinite sorrow mixed with infinite love. "These earthquakes aren't my wrath," he said. "They're the earth responding to humanity's bloodshed. When Cain killed Abel, the ground cried out to me. Now, after millennia of war, torture, genocide, violence poured out like rivers across continents, the ground is screaming." He showed me the 300 million people currently suffering from wars and conflicts, refugees fleeing with nothing but the clothes on their backs, children crying over parents' bodies, entire cities reduced to rubble. And then I saw how the earthquakes would force nations to choose, continue fighting each other, or unite to survive the earth's rebellion. "This is mercy," Jesus said, and I felt tears streaming down my face. "These earthquakes are my final attempt to shake humanity awake before the third event begins. If they choose unity, if they choose compassion over conquest, they can still change what's coming." But even as he said it, I knew. I could see it in the vision. Most wouldn't choose unity. Most would cling to their borders, their weapons, their hatreds, even as the ground beneath them crumbled. "What's the third event?" I whispered, though part of me didn't want to know. The vision shifted. I was no longer looking at earthquakes or wars. I was standing in a grocery store, but it was empty. Shelves stripped bare, not from looting, not from panic buying. The food simply stopped coming. I moved through the vision like a ghost, watching scenes unfold across the world. Financial systems froze. Banks collapsed under the weight of debt from war spending and disaster recovery. Money became worthless overnight, not because of inflation, but because people stopped believing in it. What good is currency when there's nothing left to buy? When trust itself is shattered, energy grids failed, not from seismic damage, but because nations hoarded resources, refusing to trade with enemies even as their own populations froze in winter darkness. I saw families huddled around dying fires, elderly people succumbing to cold, hospitals going dark mid-surgery. The 300 million people already in humanitarian crisis. I watched that number explode to billions. Not from lack of food or resources on Earth, but from the collapse of every system we'd built to distribute them. Trucks sat idle because there was no fuel. Trains stopped because there was no electricity. Ships remained docked because there were no payments, no insurance, no functioning ports. Jesus' voice cut through the horror. This is what I call the polycrisis. When multiple disasters feed on each other until no government, no institution, no economy can function. War destroys infrastructure. Earthquakes shatter supply chains. Fear collapses financial systems. And suddenly, everything you built your security upon crumbles like dust. I felt sick. How do people survive this? Most won't, he said, and the weight of those words crushed me. Not because resources disappear, but because humanity forgot how to share. They forgot how to trust their neighbors. They put their faith in systems and governments to save them, in money to protect them, in technology to rescue them. And when those systems failed, they'll have nothing left but each other. And most will have forgotten how to be human. The vision continued. I saw riots. I saw people turning on each other over scraps of food. I saw governments imposing martial law, soldiers shooting civilians, chaos spreading faster than any virus. But then Jesus showed me something else. Small pockets of light scattered across the dark planet. Communities, small groups of people who had gathered together, sharing what little they had, praying, helping each other survive. Not because they had more resources, but because they had faith, because they had each other. This third event isn't a punishment, Jesus said, his voice gentle but firm. It's a revelation. When every system you trusted collapses, you'll finally see what was always true. You never needed those systems. You needed each other. You needed faith. You needed me. I began to understand. The collapse wasn't about destroying humanity. It was about stripping away the illusions, the false gods of government, money, institutions, technology, so people could finally see what really mattered. The comet, Jesus continued, appeared in October 2025, just as wars escalated, earthquakes intensified, and systems began to strain. That timing isn't coincidence. It's a countdown, a divine marker saying, the time of false security is ending. Prepare your hearts, not your bunkers. And he showed me how some people, those who recognized the collapse as a spiritual awakening opportunity, would rebuild on foundations of faith and compassion. They would create new communities, new ways of living, rooted not in profit or power, but in love. Those communities would become lights in the darkness, beacons of hope for others stumbling through the chaos. But those who clung to the old systems, who refused to let go of their wealth or status or hatred, they would spiral into despair, unable to adapt, unable to survive the new world being born from the ashes of the old. Tell them this, Jesus said, placing his hand on my shoulder. The warmth of his touch flooded through me, and I felt strength I didn't know I possessed. The comet is the sign. When it fades from the sky, the countdown begins. They have a narrow window to prepare, not with bunkers or weapons, but with faith, community, and repentance. He gave me specific instructions, and I memorized every word, like my life depended on it, because it did, because everyone's life depended on it. Tell them to reject religious institutions preaching false prosperity or nationalism. Those institutions worship power, not me. Tell them to build local faith communities centered on mutual aid, neighbors, helping neighbors, strangers becoming family. Tell them to store spiritual resources, prayer, scripture, compassion, forgiveness over physical hoarding. Hoarded food will rot. Shared food will multiply. Tell them to recognize the signs. Those prophets who said September 2025 was the rapture, they felt the urgency correctly. They sensed the approaching shift. But they misunderstood the timeline. The rapture comes after the tribulation tests every soul. The comet marks the tribulation's beginning, not its end. His eyes held mine, and I felt the weight of eternity in that gaze. The first two events will happen quickly once the collapse starts. Months, not years. But the third event, the collapse, will be gradual at first, then sudden. Like a building with cracks in its foundation. It stands for years, and then one day it falls in seconds. I wanted to stay. I wanted to remain in that place of perfect love and understanding, where everything made sense and fear didn't exist. But I knew what was coming next. Now go back, Jesus said, his voice both command and benediction. You have work to do. Many will reject this message. They'll call you crazy, delusional, a fearmonger. But those who hear with spiritual ears will be saved. Not saved from suffering. Suffering is coming for everyone, but saved from despair. Because they'll understand that what looks like the end is actually a beginning. He placed both hands on my shoulders, and suddenly the peace shattered. Pain exploded through my chest like lightning. I was gasping, drowning, my lungs on fire. The brightness of heaven dissolved into harsh fluorescent lights. Beeping machines, voices shouting, someone pressing on my chest, 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm of CPR pounding through my broken ribs. We've got a pulse. We've got a pulse. I tried to speak, but a tube was down my throat. Tried to move, but restraints held me down. My body felt like it had been shattered and reassembled wrong, every nerve screaming, every muscle locked in agony. But underneath the pain, I felt something else. Peace, certainty, purpose. I wasn't afraid anymore. How could I be afraid of anything after seeing what I'd seen? After meeting who I'd met, the doctors said I'd been dead for 11 minutes. Cardiac arrest from a pulmonary embolism they hadn't caught in time. They called my survival a miracle. They called my lack of brain damage impossible. I called it exactly what it was, a mission. The first thing I did, when I could finally move, finally speak, was check the date. July 28th, 2025. Then I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and searched the news. Ukraine war still raging, worse than ever. Middle East conflicts escalating daily. And then I saw it. Reports of Comet Lemon approaching, predicted to be visible in October, a once-in-a-thousand-years event. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. It was real. Everything Jesus showed me was real. I'm not the same person who went into that hospital. The job I thought defined me doesn't matter anymore. The possessions I accumulated mean nothing. The petty grievances I held against people, they've evaporated like morning dew. All that matters now is this message. So now you know. The 3 terrifying events Jesus revealed to me. Wars cascading across continents into global conflict. The Earth's seismic rebellion across the Ring of Fire. And the collapse of every system we trusted for security. The comet isn't causing them, it's marking when they begin. As I record this in late October 2025, Comet Lemon is fading from our skies. That beautiful green glow people posted photos of, calling it stunning, calling it once in a lifetime. It was a countdown clock, and most people never realized they were watching their time run out. The Philippines earthquake happened just like he showed me. Santorini's seismic swarm continues, over 10,000 earthquakes and counting. Geologists calling it unprecedented. Wars in Ukraine and Gaza show no signs of stopping, and new conflicts are erupting in regions that were stable just months ago. The signs are here, the warnings are blaring, and still, most people scroll past them thinking it's just news, just background noise, just someone else's problem. If you're watching this, it's not by accident. You were meant to hear this message. The question is, what will you do with it? You have a choice right now, the same choice everyone has. You can dismiss this as the ravings of someone who died and came back damaged. You can close this video, go back to your life and hope I'm wrong. Or you can prepare. Not by building bunkers or stockpiling weapons. Not by hoarding supplies while your neighbors go hungry. Not by fleeing to the mountains or isolating yourself from the world. Prepare by strengthening your personal relationship with Jesus. Not through institutions that preach prosperity gospel or political power. Not through religions that promise comfort while ignoring the poor. But through direct faith prayer, scripture, surrender, transformation. Prepare by building local faith communities focused on mutual aid and compassion. Find your neighbors, learn their names, discover their needs. Create networks of trust now, before the collapse makes strangers into enemies. Prepare by rejecting fear. These events are birth pangs of a new spiritual age, not the end of everything. Yes, there will be suffering. Yes, there will be loss. But on the other side of that suffering, for those who keep faith, there's a world rebuilt on love instead of greed, on community instead of competition, on divine truth instead of institutional lies. Prepare by sharing this message with those who have spiritual ears to hear. Not everyone will listen. Jesus told me that. But some will. And those some will become the lights in the darkness, the communities that survive and help others survive. I died, I met Jesus face to face. He sent me back to tell you this. I don't expect everyone to believe me, many won't. That's okay. Belief isn't required for truth to be true. But when the collapse begins, when your bank account stops working, when grocery stores go empty, when the power grid fails and you're sitting in the dark, wondering what happened to the world you knew, remember this moment. Remember you were warned. Remember you were given time to prepare. And ask yourself, did I use it? The comet was the countdown. The clock is ticking. But there's still time if you choose faith over fear, community over systems, and divine truth over institutional lies. The choice is yours. Make it count.